will break out soon, and I will kill more.
Oh, they done took my eye. They done broke my nose, broke my jaw. They did all this shit. I resisted, but I crawled out to the road. So how did I resist? I ain't resist shit. They just did that shit. They tried to hide it from the news people, but I'm here right now.
Corrections, I think we've established everything we need to do in a first appearance hearing. He can be taken after he signs.
Later, you.
Have him sign the no contact.
I'm trying to tell you.
Dia Riley, it didn't take long for a judge to hand down the sentence to Humberto Delgado Jr.
Mr. Delgado, for the murder of Corporal Michael Roberts, this court sentences you to be put to death in the manner prescribed by law.
This is Humberto Delgado, who was accused of killing a police officer in Tampa back in 2009. Delgado faced multiple charges including premeditated murder, aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer, carrying a hidden weapon, and taking away an officer's protective gear. It all started when Corporal Mike Roberts stopped Delgado while he was pushing a shopping cart. Roberts intended to question Delgado, but Delgado refused to cooperate. This led to a physical altercation that tragically resulted in the death of Corporal Roberts.
Lie on the ground, helpless and unmoving. He took that .45 caliber pistol and he took the kill shot.
That was what the prosecution initially stated. However, the defense presented a different argument, claiming that Delgado suffered from mental illness. It was alleged that Delgado believed that the police and the rapper 50 Cent were pursuing him, although the reason for this belief was unclear.
He became something of what you would call a conspiracy theorist. And virtually every place he went, he believed there were people who were Masons who wanted him to join them and become a Mason. And when he wouldn't, then those people took it out on him.
The defense aimed to pursue an insanity defense strategy in this case, but it faced challenges due to Delgado's statement, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." The prosecution contended that this statement indicated Delgado's mental state. Ultimately, the judge's decision would determine the outcome of the case.
For the murder of Corporal Michael Roberts, this court sentences you to be put to death in the manner prescribed by law.
When you watch the video, you can see that Delgado remains completely unbothered as he cracks his neck during the sentencing. However, in 2015, the Florida Supreme Court reversed the death penalty, resulting in Delgado receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole.
This noon, a convicted killer is facing the death penalty. A Hillsborough County judge sentenced Dante Morris to lethal injection for the cold-blooded murders of 2 Tampa police officers.
This is Dante Morris, a man from Tampa, Florida. Morris faced accusations of murdering 2 police officers during a routine traffic stop in Tampa Bay. As a result, he was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. In June 2010, officers David Curtis and Jeffrey Kokab pulled Morris over during a traffic stop, unaware that it would tragically be their final encounter. Morris immediately shot and killed both officers at the scene. As his trial commenced, the courtroom was filled with people eager to witness the proceedings and find out what would happen to Morris. One of the witnesses, Morris's ex-girlfriend Ashley Price, took the stand to testify against him.
Can you please point to where he is and describe an article of clothing?
With a red shirt. That he did it.
That he did it?
Yeah.
Did you know what he was talking about?
Oh, yes.
Had he referred you to something, to look at something?
To watch the news.
Ashley proceeded to mention that Morris had confided in her about the specific locations where he had shot the officers and also revealed their racial backgrounds.
Did he tell you where he shot them, what part of their bodies?
Yes.
And where did he tell you he shot them?
In the head.
And did he use a descriptive term for them that let you know what race they were?
Yes.
And what term was that?
Crackers.
Here is the statement from a family member of the police officer, expressing their impact on behalf of the family. Officer Kokab's sister made sure to directly communicate her feelings to Morris during the proceedings.
I will never, ever be able to make new memories with my brother, now or ever again.
Here is the perspective of Officer Curtis's mother and how she experienced the situation.
Should now ask this court to put him to death immediately without hesitation.
This case received significant public attention and scrutiny. One aspect that attracted considerable focus was the release of the primary evidence, the police dashcam footage. Various opinions emerged regarding this release. Some speculated that it might have compromised the integrity of the police force, while others argued that it was done to safeguard the families of the deceased officers.
That's count 1 for the first-degree premeditated murder of David Curtis. The court imposes a sentence of death. As to count 2 for the first-degree premeditated murder of Jeffrey Kokab, the court imposes a sentence of death.
Morris appears visibly disheartened as he exits the courtroom, walking with the demeanor of someone who believes that his death is imminent.
We begin with breaking news out of Akron, where the fate of convicted cop killer Ashford Thompson has been sealed. Just a short time ago, the jury returned to the courtroom, and Ashford Thompson was sentenced to death.
This is Ashford Thompson, who faced accusations of fatally shooting a police officer by firing 4 shots directly at his head. He was officially charged with aggravated murder on July 13, 2008. The incident occurred when Twinsburg officer Josh McTarian pulled over Thompson and his girlfriend. It was alleged that Officer McTarian forcefully pinned Thompson against the car's hood and made threats. In response, Thompson shot Officer McTarian 4 times, resulting in his tragic death. This devastating loss left many people in tears. Now, let's hear the impact statement from Thompson's mother.
I feel your mother did not raise a killer, but you turned into a killer that night. You put the gun to my son's head and pulled the trigger, killing him. And that wasn't good enough. You had to shoot him 3 more times while he laid down there dead, caving in the side of his head. The shot that took his life also took mine. I'm dead inside. I'm like a shell going through the motions of life.
Officer McTarian's wife also steps forward to deliver a heartfelt statement. She expresses her belief that Thompson's remorse is insufficient and that he does not display enough sorrow for his actions.
Shot my husband in the head, and I believe all my heart, your girlfriend getting out of the car that night gave you that 2 seconds to get that gun in your pocket and shoot him in the head. And then you bent over and you shot him again and again and again. You put the gun on his head. That's disgusting. Who does that?
As the legal process unfolds and the entirety of the proceedings weigh on Thompson, he breaks down in court. Overwhelmed with guilt for his actions, he cries out, expressing his remorse and a desire for forgiveness. He even mentions his wish to face execution, seemingly seeking some form of atonement for his crimes.
I understand, what I did is a terrible thing, but I wasn't the only one in this situation.
Thompson also holds the belief that the legal process is unjust and not treating him fairly.
Just execute me then, because I can't get any kind of justice. I'm tired. I'm at the end of my rope. What can I do?
However, on the day of judgment, Thompson sat with his arms crossed, displaying a complete lack of emotion.
We, the jury, being duly impaneled and sworn, find the defendant, Ashford L. Thompson, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the offense of aggravated murder as charged in the indictment.
Ashford Thompson was sentenced to death.
Breaking news for you on this Friday. A cop killer found guilty on all counts. The jury in the trial of Quentin Smith returned its verdict this afternoon after just 3.5 hours of deliberation. Welcome to First at 4. I'm Darlene Hill. Now, Smith was convicted on 2 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of murder, and 1 count of domestic violence. They're all counts that make him eligible for the death penalty.
This is Quentin Smith, who appeared in Franklin County Common Pleas Court in Ohio. Smith was accused of shooting 2 police officers, Eric Joring and Anthony Morelli. He faced charges of 2 counts of aggravated murder and illegal possession of a firearm. The officers tragically lost their lives while responding to a 911 call made by Smith's wife. She reported that Smith had physically assaulted her and was armed with a gun. As the officers attempted to defuse the situation, Smith pulled out a gun and fired at both officers, resulting in their deaths. Due to the severity of the charges, this case endured for 2 years. Now, let's hear from one of the officers who testified as a witness.
I was going past the first apartment, another shot went off, and I couldn't do anything for him. Officer Morelli was young, he was hit, so I moved over to him real quick.
Now, we have the testimony of Officer Stacy Pentecost, which is expected to be emotional.
He was laying on the floor, holding himself up by his elbow. He looked up at us, and I held Tony's hand. And I moved to the front of Tony to get out of the way of the medics to his head, and I put my hand on his forehead.
This was an incredibly emotional and heartbreaking case. The prosecuting and defending lawyers fiercely battled in court, putting forth their arguments in front of the jury. However, when it all came down to it, the final decision rested in the hands of the jury and the judge, who held the power to determine the outcome of the case.
We, the jury, being deadlocked and unable to agree on whether the aggravating circumstances outweigh the mitigating factors beyond a reasonable doubt, hereby unanimously return the following life sentence on count 1, life imprisonment without parole. We, the jury, being deadlocked and unable to agree on whether the aggravating circumstances outweigh the mitigating factors beyond a reasonable doubt, hereby unanimously return the following life sentence on count 2, life imprisonment without parole.
Despite Smith showing no visible reaction to receiving a double life sentence, this sentencing marks the conclusion of a 2-year-long trial.
All right, is a convicted cop killer mentally competent? Following his capital murder conviction for the ambush-style murder of Sheriff's Deputy Kenneth Van, attorneys for Mark Anthony Gonzalez requested a trial to address his competency. The jury assessed the death penalty, but Gonzalez cannot be formally sentenced until the competency issue is resolved.
This is the story of Mark Anthony Gonzalez, who faced accusations of fatally shooting Bexar County Sheriff Sergeant Kenneth Van in 2011. Gonzalez was charged with murder. In May 2011, Gonzalez approached Van and shot him, causing his immediate death. Due to the nature of the case, both the defense and prosecution agreed to conduct the hearing behind closed doors. Furthermore, Gonzalez's mental competency was closely examined to ensure he was fit to stand trial. A competency trial was conducted to assess whether the death penalty, which had already been assigned to him, was warranted considering his mental state. As part of the trial, certain phone call recordings were played in court in which Gonzalez discussed the case and the jury.
Yeah, good jury. We took 5 weeks to pick this jury, so it's a 50-50 chance, you know what I mean?
The introduction of a recording and the testimony of a friend named Steve Starling in Judge Mary Roman's courtroom posed challenges for Gonzalez during the competency trial. Starling reported that Gonzalez chuckled and admitted, "I killed a cop. Don't tell anyone, not even your wife." This evidence worked against Gonzalez in his bid to establish his mental competence. On the day of sentencing, the court granted Yvonne Van, the wife of the deceased officer Kenneth Van, an opportunity to address the court and share her thoughts.
I will never have any more alone time with my husband, and my time now is truly alone in every sense of the word.
During her statement, Yvonne Van spoke about the difficulty of forgiving a man who had abandoned her and their child. Now, let's proceed to the official ruling delivered by Judge Mary Roman.
You are hereby sentenced in accordance with Texas law to death.
Throughout the court proceedings, Gonzalez remains largely silent. His composed and unaffected demeanor is both unsettling and somewhat remarkable. Now, he will join Texas's death row as his final destination.
A confessed cop killer had yet another outburst in court, and this time he got what he wanted. Luis Bracamontes was removed from the courtroom after his latest tirade and will spend the rest of his proceedings watching on a monitor.
This is the story of Luis Bracamontes, who stands accused of the murder of 2 Sacramento law enforcement officers, Sacramento County Sheriff's Deputy Danny Oliver and Placer County Sheriff's Detective Michael Davis Jr. Bracamontes faced multiple charges including first-degree murder, carjacking, illegal possession of weapons, theft of a patrol vehicle, and attempted murder. Bracamontes had a troubled history with the law. In 1996, he faced charges related to drug offenses and had been deported twice. Despite these consequences, he continued a life of crime, culminating in a violent encounter with police in 2017. During this incident, he opened fire on officers, resulting in the deaths of 2 officers and injuring 1, along with harming a civilian. What struck observers was Bracamontes' complete lack of remorse for his actions.
I will break up soon, and I will kill more.
Luis displayed a complete disregard for the seriousness of the situation. He openly mocked the judge, jury, and everyone in the courtroom, uttering profanities and laughing, smirking, and giggling uncontrollably. His behavior escalated to the point where the judge had to remove him from the courtroom and allow him to watch the rest of the proceedings via a monitor due to his disruptive outbursts. His defense team attempted to argue an insanity plea, but the judge rejected it, considering Bracamontes' status as an illegal immigrant and a previous felon. The case quickly became politicized, sparking conversations about immigration. However, despite the political backdrop, the due process of law proceeded. After a lengthy trial, it is time to reveal the verdict.
Case number 14F07390, Department 21, verdict count 1. Regarding the charge in count 1, Luis Enriquez Roy Bracamontes did unlawfully and with malice aforethought commit murder in the first degree as Sacramento County Sheriff's Deputy Daniel Oliver. We find the defendant guilty.
As the juror announced the verdict, Bracamontes displayed a complete lack of remorse. Instead, he smiled and laughed, showing no signs of regret. Ultimately, he was sentenced to death. This is the story of Esteban Carpio, who fatally shot a police officer using the officer's own weapon. Carpio faced charges of first-degree murder of a police officer, discharging a firearm during the commission of a violent crime, and assault with a dangerous weapon. The events leading up to the murder of Detective Sergeant James L. Allen were incredibly tragic. Carpio had been accused of stabbing Madeline Gatta, and during his interrogation by a Providence PD officer, he seized the officer's gun, shot him, and then jumped from the third floor of the building. As a result, Carpio entered the courtroom appearing like Hannibal Lecter, wearing a gas mask to prevent biting or spitting on anyone, with swollen eyes and bruises. Carpio claimed that he was brutalized by the police, but it was reported that his injuries were a result of the fall from the building. Nevertheless, seeing their son in that condition was heart-wrenching for his family members, who couldn't help but cry in court.
Step off.
Carpio and his attorney attempted to pursue an insanity defense strategy, but the jury did not find it convincing and ultimately rejected it.
Every day, I face the facts of what I did and what happened.
Esteban Carpio received a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. He made an attempt to appeal his sentence, but the appeal was ultimately dismissed or rejected.
Justice for the family of a fallen police lieutenant, a judge sentencing her killer to death. It is a decision Lieutenant Deborah Clayton's family and friends and the Orlando community have been waiting for since her murder in 2017.
The courtroom packed this morning as convicted killer Markeith Lloyd learned his fate.
This is Markeith Lloyd in the Ninth Circuit Court of Florida. Lloyd stood accused and was subsequently convicted of the murder of Orlando Police Lieutenant Deborah Clayton. His charges encompassed multiple counts of murder, including the killing of his girlfriend and the unborn child, as well as the shooting of his girlfriend's mother and brother. The official charges brought against him were first-degree murder of a law enforcement officer, attempted murder of a law enforcement officer, aggravated assault with a firearm, carjacking with a firearm, and possession of a firearm as a convicted felon. The tragic events unfolded when Lloyd shot and killed his girlfriend and their unborn child, and also targeted his girlfriend's mother and brother. Authorities launched a search for Lloyd, and it was during this time that he encountered an altercation with Lieutenant Deborah Clayton. Lloyd fired multiple shots at her, striking her 4 times, including a fatal shot to her neck. Following the shooting, Lloyd was apprehended and subjected to physical confrontation. Here, in the aftermath of the incident, we witnessed Lloyd attempting to provide an explanation for his actions.
They done took my eye. They done broke my nose, broke my jaw. They did all this shit. I resisted, but I crawled out to the road. So how did I resist? I ain't resist. They just did that shit. They tried to hide it from the news people, but I'm here right now.
Corrections, I think we've established everything we need to do in a first appearance hearing. He can be taken after he signs. Have him sign the no contact.
I'm trying to tell you.
Lloyd didn't hold back as he angrily directed profanities at the judge during the court proceedings. The police, on the other hand, defended their use of force and asserted that apprehending Lloyd was necessary due to the extreme danger he posed as a criminal. Throughout the case, Lloyd's mental state became a subject of scrutiny, and a psychologist was called upon to offer their professional assessment. Here is the psychologist's perspective on Lloyd's mental condition and its relevance to the case.
What you see are sort of classic examples of schizophrenia. Sometimes you see that in individuals who are suffering from bipolar disorder and in other mental illnesses.
Contrary to expectations, Lloyd asserted that he did not suffer from any mental illness.
Mr. Lloyd, do you believe you're crazy?
No.
Lloyd further explains that he believes his actions were driven by temporary insanity at the time they occurred, rather than a permanent state of insanity.
Verdict as to count 2. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 2 of the charge. The defendant is guilty of attempted first-degree murder of a law enforcement officer. Special finding form regarding statute 775.087(2). As to count 2, during the commission of the offense, did the defendant actually possess a firearm? Yes.
Lloyd maintains a blank expression as the death penalty is pronounced for his conviction in the killing of Lieutenant Clayton. Additionally, he has already received a life sentence for the murder of his girlfriend and their unborn child.